This footage was never meant to be seen again. Erased, encrypted, and presumed gone forever, until the FBI broke through a sophisticated digital wall just 10 minutes ago, resurrecting fragments a kidnapper believed were permanently destroyed. Inside a high-security forensic lab in Phoenix, analysts are now staring at blurred, low-resolution images pulled from a wiped system. What they're seeing is chilling. Figures lurking around Nancy Guthrie's home days before she vanished. Watching, waiting. Because if these images are real, then everything the world believed about 1:47 a.m. on February 1st is a lie. Every camera at the Guthrie residence didn't just fail, it was deliberately silenced. A professional-grade signal jammer wiped out all lenses, creating a 41-minute void of static and darkness. But in what seemed like a flawless shutdown, a tiny anomaly remained, buried deep inside a secondary cache. A microscopic trace. One that now points to a face never meant to be uncovered. Among the recovered fragments, one detail stands out: a shadowy figure lingering near the swimming pool exactly 37 minutes before the abduction. At the same moment, 3 neighboring camera systems mysteriously collapsed in perfect sync, right as the utility box was tampered with. Coincidence or coordination? And the most unsettling question remains: if the suspect was already inside the backyard at 1:10 a.m., why wait nearly until 2 a.m. to make a move? Tonight, the illusion of a perfect crime begins to unravel. What you're about to see is not just another report. It's the breaking point of a digital blackout that was never supposed to end. The truth has been buried behind precision, timing, and silence. And now, as the first pieces resurface, we go back to where it all began. A timeline so carefully constructed, it was meant to look like nothing more than a string of unfortunate coincidences. Here on the afternoon of January 30th, 2026, Nancy Guthrie appeared to be living a quiet, settled life in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, a place she believed was finally safe. That evening felt ordinary. Dinner with her daughter Annie and son-in-law Tommaso Cayan, filled with the kind of routine comfort no one questions. At exactly 9:48 p.m., Tommaso drove the 84-year-old home. No one knew it would be the last time her family would ever see her alive. And Nancy was a woman of fragile health and strong faith, dependent on a pacemaker to regulate her heart and medication to ease her daily struggles. For her, stability wasn't a luxury, it was survival. But everything shifted in the early hours of February 1st. At 1:47 a.m., the primary Google Nest camera at her front door was suddenly bypassed. From that moment on, the house fell into silence. 41 minutes of complete digital darkness. Then came the detail that changed everything. At 2:28 a.m., the Bluetooth signal from Nancy's implanted pacemaker abruptly disconnected from its bedside monitor. Not due to malfunction, but because the device was no longer within range. She hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. And when authorities arrived, they found almost nothing. Just faint drops of blood on the porch and a tampered utility box at the edge of the property. For weeks, investigators believed those 41 minutes were a perfect blackout. But now, that narrative is beginning to fracture. Because while the main system was silenced, the backyard cameras were still watching, quietly recording fragments of a truth someone never intended to leave behind. Those 41 missing minutes are no longer an empty void, they are being rebuilt, frame by frame, into a chilling digital record. At the center of it all stands Nancy Guthrie, a woman tied to a high-profile family known for public transparency, yet now trapped in a mystery that refuses to stay buried. Her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, co-anchor of the Today Show, has become the voice the world hears, her emotional appeals cutting through the noise. But behind the scenes, investigators are turning their attention inward, toward those closest to Nancy. Tommaso Cayan, the son-in-law, quiet, cooperative, yet his blue Honda CR-V remained in FBI custody for weeks. Not for routine checks, but for a meticulous forensic teardown, suggesting agents were hunting for something far more precise than fingerprints. If he was cleared, why hold the vehicle? According to sources, the focus was on transfer evidence. Microscopic traces of soil, fibers, anything that could silently connect his last drive with Nancy to the suspect's path. And then there's Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, known to share an unbreakable bond with her mother. In the aftermath, Witnesses described her as distant, guarded. Was it grief, or was she shielding something deeper, something tied to the home's security system? And just when the puzzle seems complex enough, another name surfaces: Luke Anthony Daly, a 37-year-old with a layered criminal past, whose Range Rover was seized during a high-risk SWAT operation on February 13th. Each piece adds weight to the story, and with every new detail, the line between coincidence and coordination begins to blur. Luke Daly wasn't just another name in the file. He had already served 18 months for fleeing law enforcement and carried a record tied to drug solicitation. So when his vehicle was seized, one detail immediately stood out: a tarp hastily placed over the rear. What was being concealed in that moment? And as the tension tightens between a grieving public figure, a closely examined son-in-law, and a local man known for running from the law, suspicion begins to shift into something far more focused. Each individual appears to hold a piece of the puzzle, but one of those pieces doesn't quite fit. Questions start to surface. Was the security consultant who visited Nancy's home truly an outsider, or someone she knowingly let in? Why did neighboring cameras fail in such a precise pattern, losing visibility only in the direction of her driveway? This is no longer just a physical investigation. The truth now exists at a microscopic level, buried in data most people would never think to examine. Newly obtained court documents point to a critical breakthrough. Investigators recovered thumbnail data from the backyard security system, cameras once believed to be completely wiped during the Wi-Fi jamming. But digital forensics revealed something the perpetrator didn't anticipate. Even with the main video stream suppressed, the system's residual cache continued saving low-resolution image fragments. And those fragments tell a disturbing story. Timestamps show a figure standing near the side utility box at exactly 11:14 p.m. on January 31st, nearly 3 hours before the abduction. This wasn't random. It was preparation. It was intent. The suspect didn't arrive by chance. They were already setting the stage. By adding another layer, court filings tied to the seizure of Luke Daly's Range Rover reveal that investigators spent 3 hours documenting Annie Guthrie's home under the cover of night. Not casually, but with precision. Because at this point, the question is no longer just who committed the crime, but how deeply the truth is connected to those closest to the blackout itself. Newly leaked messages are beginning to expose cracks beneath the surface, hinting at a dispute over the home's internet provider just weeks before everything happened. At the same time, federal analysts are combing through financial records that point to an attempted access of a Bitcoin wallet tied to a $50,000 ransom demand sent directly to media outlets. But what truly stands out isn't the amount, it's the detail hidden inside. The message referenced the exact location of Nancy's Apple Watch, information that was never made public. If this was a random burglary, how could an outsider possibly know that? One contradiction continues to raise alarms. Sheriff Nanos publicly dismissed the damaged utility box as unrelated. Yet behind the scenes, FBI analysts are treating that very box as the origin point of the signal disruption. System logs reveal something even more precise. The signal dropped exactly 14 seconds before the front door was breached. So why does the official narrative ignore that timeline? And who made the call to sideline the only pilot capable of tracking thermal signatures that night? And as the investigation narrows, the so-called shadow figure has now become the central focus of the FBI's Phoenix field office. Based on reconstructed thumbnails, he is believed to be a male standing between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 0 inches, with a lean, athletic frame. But it's not just his appearance that stands out, it's the way he moves. Controlled, efficient, almost tactical. The kind of motion that suggests military or high-level security training. His behavior reveals even more. For 3 consecutive nights leading up to the abduction, he was captured surveilling the backyard pool area, always within the same narrow window between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. This wasn't, it was routine. He wore a balaclava, but deliberately left his mouth exposed. Not careless, but calculated, prioritizing airflow and communication over full concealment. Every detail points to planning, precision, and a presence that was never meant to be noticed. The suspect doesn't behave like someone acting on impulse. He follows a calculated, cooling phase, typical of a predator. This wasn't just about taking a victim, it was about controlling the entire environment. The detail of a flashlight held in his mouth reveals something critical. He needed both hands free, likely to operate technical equipment such as a signal jammer. This is someone who doesn't just exploit darkness, he takes satisfaction in creating it. According to Dr. Julian Bain from the Criminal Research Institute, this profile points to an individual with prior experience, someone who has likely carried out similar high-tech intrusions without ever being detected. A ghost in the system, adapting to a world where disabling Wi-Fi can erase presence. But beneath that precision lies a weakness: overconfidence. He believed the system glitch was flawless, never realizing it left behind the very trace now being used to identify him. Investigators are now working to reconstruct his face from a mere 64-pixel thumbnail, turning fragments into identity. And that raises a deeper question. Is he operating alone, or is this part of a coordinated digital crew? His equipment reportedly matches items purchased under an alias from a tactical store in Phoenix, suggesting planning that extends beyond a single night. Experts are now shifting focus, not on what was erased, but on what survived. The recovery of thumbnail images from a wiped system is exceptionally rare, and it exposes a crucial flaw in the execution. The jammer successfully blocked the live feed to the cloud, but couldn't prevent the device's internal chip from briefly caching images before shutdown. As Marcus Thorne explains, the suspect thought he was deleting the entire film, but overlooked the still frames left behind. In total, 12 distinct images now document his approach. And when Nancy's pacemaker signal abruptly disappeared at 2:28 a.m., it became the most undeniable piece of truth, because unlike everything else, it couldn't be manipulated. And what happened that night wasn't a system error, it was a physical removal. The sudden loss of signal from Nancy's pacemaker wasn't a malfunction, but proof she had been taken out of range. For an 84-year-old woman, being forcibly moved across harsh desert terrain under those conditions is almost always fatal. This is no longer just a kidnapping investigation. The FBI is now facing a far darker, searching for a burial site somewhere within the vast desert of Santa Cruz County. According to Sarah Jenkins, the failures in the early investigation were critical. She points to the decision to demote the department's only pilot trained to operate thermal imaging radar just weeks before the incident. That single move may have cost everything. Because if that aircraft had been airborne at 2:30 a.m., scanning the foothills for a heat signature, the outcome could have been very different. Another troubling signal comes from the FBI's silence. The agency has refused to release the recovered backyard thumbnails, and to experts like Chris Ware, that suggests one thing. They believe the suspect is still watching, still tracking the case, still anticipating their next move. The geography itself tells a chilling story. Nancy's home, tucked into the Catalina foothills, is defined by isolation. The distance from her front door to the damaged utility box, just 142 feet, can be crossed in under 30 seconds. Meanwhile, investigators have mapped the jammer's effective radius to roughly 450 feet, perfectly covering her home and the two neighboring properties whose cameras also failed. This wasn't random interference, it was precision. And then there's the wider map. Her home sits just 7.2 miles, about a 12-minute drive, from the Mexican restaurant El Charro. If the suspect had been tracking her movements since a Today Show appearance months earlier, he would have had ample time to learn every route, every blind spot in Tucson. But the real complication lies farther out. The Santa Cruz County desert, where signal detection efforts have been focused, is nearly 64 miles away. A distance that raises one final question. How far was she really taken? And how carefully was this entire operation planned? The timeline creates a problem investigators can't ignore. If the signal jammer activated at 1:47 a.m. and the pacemaker disconnected at 2:28 a.m., that leaves exactly 41 minutes. Even at a steady 60 miles per hour, the suspect could only cover 41 miles, far short of the 64-mile distance to the Santa Cruz desert. The numbers don't align. So what really happened in that window? Was Nancy moved to a temporary location still within the 450-foot jammer radius before being transported further? Or was there a second vehicle waiting just beyond the foothills, ready to take over? The geography hints at something closer, something prepared in advance. Witnesses reported a white SUV idling at a trailhead just 1.2 miles away at 2:10 a.m., right in the middle of that critical window. Coincidence, or part of a coordinated handoff? Investigators are now weighing multiple theories. The first, the Savannah Stalker. An individual obsessed, either as a fan or a critic, with Savannah Guthrie. In this scenario, the suspect tracked Nancy from a public appearance, used technical expertise to disable the home systems, and abducted her as a way to get closer to Savannah's world. But that theory raises a contradiction. Why demand only $50,000? For a family of that profile, it's an unusually low figure. The second theory points inward. A possible security breach. Someone with inside knowledge of Nancy's medical routine, her pacemaker, even the placement of her medication. But if that's true, it opens another gap. Where exactly was Tommaso Caione's vehicle between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m.? Despite being publicly cleared, the extensive forensic teardown of his car suggests investigators are still questioning parts of the timeline. And when did a so-called security consultant gain access to the home's Wi-Fi credentials under the pretense of an upgrade? Then comes the most unsettling possibility, the digital harvest. A theory that shifts the focus entirely. What if Nancy Guthrie was never the true target? What if the operation was designed for something bigger? Something embedded within the data, the network, the access itself? Because if that's the case, then the abduction may have been just one piece of a much larger, far more calculated plan. What if Nancy Guthrie was never the true objective, but the access point? By taking her, the suspect may have unlocked far more than a physical victim. Biometric data, passwords, and a gateway into the Guthrie family's vast digital footprint. In that light, those 41 minutes inside the house take on a completely different meaning. This wasn't a struggle with an elderly woman. It may have been the extraction of an entire digital life. The recovered thumbnails add an eerie layer to this theory. They show the suspect standing still, focused on a device in his hand, not moving, not rushing, waiting, as if watching a process complete. Not an abduction in chaos, but a calculated pause, like a progress bar slowly reaching 100%. But even with these revelations, critical gaps remain. One alternative explanation challenges everything. What if the so-called glitch wasn't a jammer at all, but a simple equipment failure triggered by the damaged utility box? If that box had been struck earlier in the day, it could have caused unstable internet for hours, creating an opportunity for someone to act when the cameras went dark. And yet that explanation begins to collapse under scrutiny. The neighboring camera systems, operating on separate circuits, also failed at the exact same time. That level of synchronization is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. And then there's the blood evidence. Arguably the most troubling inconsistency of all. If Nancy was taken from her bed, as initially claimed, why were the only blood drops found outside on the porch? The absence of any trail inside the house suggests something very different, that she was moved to the doorway first, and only then injured. A detail that directly contradicts the official account. And one final question lingers in the background. Why did the FBI quietly shift its command post to Phoenix? Because whatever they uncovered, it was significant enough to move the center of the investigation itself. Did the investigation stall in Tucson, or did it lead somewhere far more calculated, into a digital trail pointing straight to Phoenix? And why did the ransom note reference an Apple Watch that, according to the FBI, never left its charging cradle? 10 minutes ago, everything we thought we understood about the Nancy Guthrie case shifted. Sources now reveal a stunning breakthrough. Not a fingerprint, not DNA, but a Bluetooth pairing record. A device sharing the same MAC address as the suspected signal jammer attempted to connect to a vehicle within the Guthrie family circle just 3 days before the abduction. This changes everything. The suspect wasn't just watching from a distance. He had already infiltrated their digital ecosystem. He wasn't just outside the house. He was inside their network, inside their car systems, inside their daily routines. A presence embedded long before the night of the crime. And it goes deeper. That same MAC address has now been traced to a purchase made at a tactical supply store in Phoenix, under a name that has never surfaced in any official report. But here's the twist. That individual was recently contracted by a utility company servicing the Catalina foothills. In other words, the suspect may have been hiding in plain sight, as the very technician sent to fix the internet issues the family had been experiencing. The glitch wasn't a malfunction. It may have been a feature, deliberately installed. And if that's true, then one question becomes unavoidable. How many other homes in that area are quietly being monitored the same way? Because if the suspect built the system, he didn't just break in, he designed the cage. The most chilling detail still lingers. If the FBI has already identified his digital credentials inside Nancy's home network, why hasn't an arrest been made? What, or who, is being protected? What you've just seen goes far beyond the surface narrative. This is the forensic reality of a crime that began long before the abduction itself, a digital execution constructed over time. With the recovery of the backyard thumbnails, the illusion of an invisible predator is collapsing. The map, the data, the patterns, they all point to one truth. He was never a ghost. Just someone who understood exactly how to disappear. And yet one critical piece is still missing, the one answer that matters most. Where is Nancy Guthrie? Every theory leads somewhere, but none close the loop. Was this the work of a contractor hiding in plain sight? Or something even deeper, a coordinated digital harvest far beyond a single target? And what about the sheriff's D- performance? Was it incompetence, or a distraction from something far more deliberate? And the truth is, the more people begin to understand how signal jammers and smart home systems can be exploited, the harder it becomes for predators like this to operate unseen. Awareness is no longer optional. It's a line of defense. Because what's coming next may be even more disturbing. A hidden connection between this ransom demand and a second missing person case the FBI has kept buried for nearly a decade. The net is tightening. The blurred thumbnails are being sharpened. The so-called glitch is no longer noise, it's evidence. And as forensic teams in Phoenix work through the night, one question refuses to fade. If someone could orchestrate this level of precision against the Guthrie family, then who else might already be under watch? Because in the end, the desert doesn't forget, and now, neither do the cameras. When the Wi-Fi goes dark, the illusion disappears, and only the truth remains. Stay alert. Lock your doors.